Hello and welcome back to the 100 Day Art Challenge. If this is the first time you're watching one of these videos, then just know that this is number 50 of 100. And I am so glad to show you this series as it progresses, because once again this video is going to be showing you me painting an oil painting of a still life subject. And I set up a little toy car. This is a little model car which we've got a few of these in the house, and I thought this one's a lovely colour. I really like the shape, so I wanted to get started. And just like the previous video where I used Rowney Georgian, I'm using cheaper paint again, which is not cheaper than Rowney Georgian but cheaper than the Michael Harding that I was showing off a little while ago. And instead for this video I'm using my Winsor & Newton and seeing if there's much difference, and there is a slight difference. I'm using a Jackson's white as well, for titanium white, and I like Jackson's. I think that's a bit higher quality, a bit more expensive, but it makes a difference in my view anyway. And so that Jackson's is kind of a thick creamy white, and then the Winsor & Newton, very decent oil paints. I think it's really nice, but it's not like Jackson's or Michael Harding. I need to try some of the other companies as well, like Gambling and people like that, because I've heard good things about these companies, so I'm going to try that out. But yeah, so I'm basically trying to box off the shapes for this little toy car, and I really like the fact that with oil paints I'm really learning this medium at the moment, so I'm discovering these things based on taking the same steps that I've seen other artists take on videos which they publish. And the steps they take is to draw first your subject with the darker pigment that you mix. So you mix a dark colour and then draw with that on the surface. And I have a bright orange ground colour on all of these boards, and I like that because it's nice and vibrant. I don't like the idea that any white would stick through where I haven't touched it on the surface. So if it has orange underneath, it means that I'll definitely see it and be able to paint over it. Or if I like to leave a little bit behind, instead of it being white that's a bit overpowering in a brightness way, orange has this different vibrancy to it, which is not as bright as white, because white is going to be the lightest colour that you can use. But using orange is darker, but it's also bright, and it has this lovely, it just works with other colours in a very interesting way. The relation between whatever colour you're using and a bright orange is quite interesting, and I always appreciate that relationship between them. So yeah, I draw with the darker pigment first and get the shape, and then start to fill in some of the darker shadow colours. And then after that I work in the midtones, and the very last thing that I do is the lighter areas, and then paint in the background so that I can cut into those shapes. And I really enjoy that process. Going through it is very enjoyable for me because I like the drawing aspect, and then I appreciate the fact that drawing in shadows can reveal the shape of the subject in early stages of your painting, which I think is quite rewarding. The most difficult part for me is then putting on the midtones, which is the next step, because that flattens the image, and it's then waiting for you to add the lighter colours on top to make it pop out again and give it some depth. Even though mixing in the midtones does allow you to enjoy the mixture of the darker colours and the midtones together, because that can be quite nice. And there is a bit of push and pull for things which I may have mismeasured, which is easy to do, and I'm trying to teach myself how to do the still life studies, or I'm teaching myself to do just shapes and forms with this type of paint, using still life as a way to develop my skills and abilities with oil paint, and just my experience of using them, so that I understand how they do and don't work in certain areas. I tried some plein air painting. If you haven't seen the previous videos, I did do a few where I went out and painted a landscape, and it didn't go very well especially, but I did do one still life in my friend's garden of some poppies, and that was fun, but I had a completely different mindset for that painting than I do for most other paintings, and that's what I need to really try to understand is that one of the steps I should take when I'm starting a piece of work is to think about a general idea, not a specific honed idea, but a general idea of where I want it to go, what I want it to look like in a very loose and vague sense. Do I want it to have built up vague tonality, so it's more mid-tone and light, or do I want it to have dramatic light and dark? Do I want it to have really fine brushwork where I've agonized over certain shapes and highlights? Excuse me. Or do I want it to be a bit more impressionistic, where it's very loose and it's got a lot of movements and you can see the brush marks? Do I want it to be expressionistic, where it's got a lot of emotion in there and it's really communicating something personal because I've injected something a bit more experiential into the painting process? Or something else entirely, because there are lots of different approaches you can have. But if you have a vague idea of what you want to do, then whatever you will achieve by the end will be guided by that intention early on, and that's not something I'm used to doing. But on the odd occasion where I have done that, it always seems to have benefited me afterwards, is that I've thought, this is what I'm looking at, but this is what I want to see on my canvas, instead of trying to describe exactly what I'm looking at. Or is that what I want to do? And I'm never sure what exactly it is that I want to do. And what happens normally is that if I'm doing a landscape, for example, I think I will imagine that I'm working towards a realistic painting, and then when I start painting I panic because that doesn't immediately happen, and so I go impressionistic, and that doesn't serve the painting, because then I'm panicking and I've made too many decisions early on that I'm trying to correct those decisions in the mid stage of the painting, which makes it quite ugly. Because if you'd have made better decisions early, then everything that happens after that point is going to serve the picture a lot sooner than what it does when you're trying to correct bad decisions you've made. So that's a lesson that I should have learnt early on, but instead I keep reliving that lesson over and over again. And it is tricky. I still enjoy the painting process, even though it is punishing when you're looking at a painting that you've made which doesn't exactly do what you want it to do. Now, this painting I'm doing here isn't necessarily an exception to what I'm talking about. I didn't think about this is the finish that I want, but it's a simple still life, and I found that with these studies that I'm doing, it's trying to teach myself how to describe something on a small canvas, not a canvas, but a small picture plane, and try to achieve a bit more experience and knowledge with the paint than I had previously. And each time I paint a still life, I'm attempting to add on top of the previous experience. So I don't want it to be a repeated experience. I don't want it to be doing the same thing again. Now, when I say that, there is another toy car that I do, but there's a reason why I think that is more difficult and adds on to the experience instead of what I'm doing here, which is it's not a simple shape necessarily. There's a lot of different angles to describe, but it's simple in the way that it's black, white and a creamy white colour. So it's not the more difficult things to paint can be based in the nuances. So that's what I would say. So look forward to the next few videos coming up. But that's what I've painted for now. I hope you enjoyed it. I appreciate you watching the video. I will be making these videos and uploading them every day. We're halfway through. I hope you're enjoying it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you tomorrow.